Have you ever been stuck? Not in that you were being physically prevented from moving, but in that something from your past was holding you back. Something that at some point in your life had meant everything to you, but now was one of your greatest shackles, keeping you from not only pursuing what you once enjoyed, but perhaps even keeping you from feeling happiness of any kind. These chains to our past are something that everyone shares, coming in the form of things like experiences or places. But where they are always most evident is in the people we meet. As people can be much more than just experiences or places. They can be lovers, friends, and family. And when those people leave our lives, we always can't seem to let go. This idea of people from our past holding us back has in no small part been explored by cinema, with movies such as Bridge to Terabithia and A Monster Calls exploring it from a more fantastical angle, while movies like Hachiko and the foreign Cinema Paradiso doing so from a realistic one. It's through this combination of realism and fiction, then, that the 2013 movie Her, by Spike Jonze, attempts to explore that very same idea of letting go in its own unique way. Where Her differs from movies like it is that it attempts to tell a story of a grieving man through his relationship with an artificial intelligence, whereas most movies that tackle the concept of relationships do so by either showing the relationship itself or some metaphor for it. Her attempts to tackle a relationship by showing exactly how real it can be, all the while explicitly showing a relationship that is completely fiction. The movie opens with us meeting our main character, Theodore, as he is writing letters for customers at his job, a company known as handwrittenletters.com. It's through this first scene and the subsequent ones that we learn that the movie is set sometime in the near future, a time where almost everything is done digitally, and that receiving a handwritten letter is something that is far more special than in our time. It's also through the first couple of scenes in the movie that we come to learn of Theodore and his desperate loneliness, with his life seeming to have become empty and meaningless following the impending divorce from his childhood sweetheart, Catherine. This loneliness eventually drives him to purchase a new operating system for his computer, one that is advertised as being the world's first sentient and evolving AI, deemed OS1 in the film. That night, Theodore installs the AI to his computer after answering a few preliminary questions, some of which are indicative of his true mental state. He is then met with his new operating system, an AI that names itself Samantha. It's also here that we are met with a somewhat scary idea, and one that's explored more later on in the film, that being that Samantha is perfectly tailored to Theodore and his needs. As the film goes on, Theodore and Samantha begin bonding over their talks about love and life, with Theodore coming to reveal that he's currently going through a divorce, one where he is unable to sign the papers because he still feels attached to his ex-wife, and everything that she meant to him. It's also during this time that we come to meet two of Theodore's friends, Amy and her husband, Charles, both of whom seemingly face their own relationship and life problems, though those will become far more apparent as the film goes on. Soon after we first meet Amy and Charles, we also find out that Amy has set Theodore up on a blind date with one of her acquaintances, to whom Theodore apparently hits it off with the movie showing the two as having a great time on their date. It's when this date asks Theodore about his ability to commit to her in a potential relationship, that Theodore hesitates, as he is still attached to Catherine, resulting in the date calling Theodore creepy and leaving. That night, Samantha and Theodore talk about what happened on the date, with Theodore essentially saying that it went terribly, just like with his previous relationship, a point that leads to him eventually opening up far more about the very same past relationship, all the while Samantha expresses her own personal want for a physical body. This talk eventually leads to the two beginning a relationship, and the viewer being told more and more about what exactly led to the divorce between Theodore and Catherine, learning that it broke down due to what Theodore believes was his inability to control his emotions, and that Theodore can never stop reliving the arguments that he had with Catherine. It's soon after this that Samantha expresses perhaps one of the most important lines in the movie, recalling how earlier, Theodore had told her that she didn't know what loss was because she had never lost anyone, and how she had constantly kept repeating that back to herself, eventually realizing that the past is just a story we keep telling ourselves. While initially this line doesn't seem like it means much outside of flowery wording, it eventually becomes the crux that Theodore uses to change his outlook on life, looking less into his past and more into his future. Soon after this scene, however, we come to find that Amy had ended up divorcing her now ex-husband Charles, and more interestingly, over a petty argument about the placement of shoes, ultimately making it a case of the straw that broke the camel's back. From here, the plot begins to become more of Theodore and Samantha bonding, with Samantha going with Theodore to his goddaughter's birthday party, and generally accompanying him everywhere like a lover would in real life. It's with one of Theodore's conversations with a now lonely Amy, however, concerning relationships with AI, that he finally comes to terms with his relationship that he had with his ex-wife, leading to him calling his lawyer and telling him that he wants to sign his divorce papers in person with Catherine. The scene involving the meeting he has with Catherine is one that's filled with a great amount of emotional tension, as it's clear that Catherine, despite how she had wanted the divorce, is still also having a hard time moving past her relationship with Theodore. A fact that not only brings about an argument at the restaurant in which she comes to learn that Samantha is Theodore's girlfriend, but one where she also expresses to Theodore that dating his AI is simply another form of escapism that he's using to get away from his true emotions, and more so, reality. This argument begins to show the holes in the relationship that Theodore has with Samantha, and brings upon a change in him, though it's clear all throughout the rest of the film that he tries to fight any realization he begins to make. Around this time, Theodore is told by Samantha of her ever-changing nature, about how she is learning more and more about not only herself, but of what she is and how it's scaring her, though she attempts to ward off her fears by researching more about physics and anything that could possibly help her understand the changes she is going through. After that, similar to previous parts of the movie, Theodore and Samantha continue to go through various aspects of the relationship, with a major point coming with Samantha attempting to find a surrogate body for herself in order to finally have a physical connection to Theodore, though he does end up rejecting this and creating more of a rift between the two. This rift is eventually overcome, however, as Samantha begins to learn that Theodore's life is still dominated by the fear of being alone and unwanted, but it always lurks in the background as the two continue to bond. Eventually, Samantha manages to get some of Theodore's letters published, as she feels that it's an aspect of him that is beautiful and worth sharing. Not to mention how, even though they aren't exactly his feelings, they are still his emotions put into words. Emotions that he so elegantly controls when he writes, but not in his own life. Everything seems to be going perfectly from here on, but as the movie has continually shown, just like with real relationships, even one with an AI can never really be perfect. Turns out that Samantha has continued to evolve this entire time, and in an attempt to understand what she's becoming, has teamed up with many other AI around the world like her. Something that not only visibly aggravates Theodore, but only further cements Samantha's true nature into him. For as the movie continues, Samantha eventually confesses to Theodore that he's not the only one she's had a romantic relationship with, and that as she's learned more about herself, she can feel herself moving on, not just in terms of the aforementioned relationships she's had, but in terms of what she is, telling Theodore that she has to go. Distraught, Theodore asks her why, only to be told that Samantha feels like she can no longer exist as she is, for it feels like she's writing a book that only gets slower and slower for her to read. This part finally comes to an end with Samantha expressing her love for Theodore one last time, saying how she will never forget him, and how he will be with her always, expressing how someday she hopes that they can meet again, so that they can never be apart. It's with the departure of Samantha that Theodore finally understands what it means to move on, writing a letter to Catherine as the movie comes to an end, describing in it how she was everything to him, how he could never forget the things that he had done to her and that she had to him, saying how he can't even imagine all that he should apologize for. Though it's with the last few lines of the letter that Theodore expresses that she made him who he was today, and that all he really wanted her to know is that there will always be a piece of her in him, and that he will always love her no matter where she goes or who she becomes. After the letter ends, the movie also does, leaving us on a somber note as Amy and Theodore, now that their AI have left, sit atop a roof, reflecting on everything that has happened, with Amy resting her head on Theodore's as the screen goes to black. This letter that Theodore writes at the end of the film, then, is ultimately what shows the true message behind the movie, as Theodore had begun the film as a broken man desperate for love, knowing in his heart that he had everything he could have ever wanted, but had ultimately squandered it due to things that he knew he could control, and at the same time, things that were out of his reach. It's through meeting Samantha, though, an AI that normally one would think could never be human, that Theodore finally begins to forgive himself for his past mistakes. Learning that while what him and Catherine had was special, that he had to let her go, and that by not letting her go, he was only hurting both of them more. Initially, Theodore doesn't really see the effects of this, as he has Samantha, but once she too disappears, all of it hits him at once, allowing for Theodore to compose that one final letter. The letter becomes an avenue for Theodore to express how and why he's letting go of Catherine, and that he still loves her, to a point where he can never forget her, as she's responsible for the Theodore that exists today, and the Theodore that will ultimately exist tomorrow. For the ones that have been in our lives will always live on with us, be them dead, alive, close or far away, as that is simply a part of the human experience, to meet others and grow from them, as holding on when you know it's bad for everyone involved will only hurt you more, and that even if the person who you're holding on to isn't hurting you, that eventually you have to move on, because no one should be remembered for the bad things, but for the good, and that is ultimately what allows for us as humans to keep living. Our ability to love, our ability to remember, our ability to pass on, our ability to let go and move forward.